Now joining us live in studio on this particular story is political analyst Mr. Dumsani Hlophe. Mr. Hlophe, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Now, Dumsani, 24 hours is a long time in politics. I mean, on Wednesday, we had a premier committing to resign. He spoke and said he's ready to pack his bags and head home. And then a day later, we have his office stating that he has in fact gone on leave. The PEC was not consulted and therefore rejected his attempt at resigning. What do you make of all of this?
Well, I think it was a serious political miscalculation by the PEC at the Northwest, because I don't think at this early stage of a new National Executive Committee with a new president, I mean, it hasn't even finished 6 months. So they are still emboldened, they are still powerful. So as a structure within the Northwest, you don't necessarily have to challenge them in the manner that you have done. So it was a serious miscalculation on the part of the PEC.
Now, Mr. Hlophe, I want to get back to you, but we seem to be having some audio challenges with you. But just perhaps to give people a recap thus far of the issues plaguing the Northwest, we know there are conflation of party and state issues, which is an age-old problem. But beyond this, we had the Inter-Ministerial Task Team report on the political situation in the Northwest, which is set to be released next week. Again, a number of people saying that you've got a parallel process here. You've got the Inter-Ministerial Task Team, which is in fact put together to look at the governance issues, but then you also have a political situation that's playing out. So the Inter-Ministerial Task Team is not going to look at that. So talk to me about the conflation of party and state, an age-old problem, Dumsani, where now we've got the PEC removing what some would say in the Northwest, this is my premier. And we've got a political party that has gone on to remove my premier. We expected that this would be done or led by the government, that there must be a legitimate government process that takes place before you remove a premier.
Well, not necessarily, because in a multi-party democracy, one of the strongest things that you need is to have a center of the ruling party to be very strong. In fact, everything, the stability of a ruling party, it starts with the stability of the ruling part at an organizational level, at a Luthuli house, you know, in this particular instance. So if you don't have that kind of a situation, you get a situation where those that are deployed in state apparatus, then they begin to develop their own fiefdom. So this is why, for example, you could have a super that goes on a rampage, that is stepping down, is not stepping down. And the sense that they have in that part of the world is the belief that they can challenge, you know, the new leadership of the ANC at a national level, which is a very serious miscalculation. So there are two ways of dealing with this matter. The ANC can deal with this matter at an organizational level, but at the same time, if you look at what they've done from the government perspective, they have taken a ministerial task team to look into
the governance issues.
The performance issues, delivery issues, and all of that. So either way, Supra is not on a very good standing. His own PEC is not on a very solid ground, or even those that are MPLs in the North, they are not necessarily on a very standing ground. So in essence, Nomfundo, we are hamba is.
We are humble.
The question is when and how. Not Kutsi, you're trying to tell me.
But for me, we've got a situation here where many are saying that this is a time-buying strategy, that Supra is planning now the mother of all battles, that he's going to fight his detractors on the street politically, that this is what this is going to be. Do you think gloves are off at this point?
I don't necessarily, look, maybe it's testing the waters. Because, you see, when you're going to deal with a new leadership, this new leadership, which is the ANC, at the national level, they want to send a message that they are in charge, that they are in control. So you cannot have a situation at the beginning of a new term of a political leadership. You have some parts of leaders throughout the country who suddenly try to believe to be their own chiefdoms. It doesn't do well for the ruling party at the national level. So some decision will be taken. But the strategy which I think Ramaphosa has put in place is to make sure that the processes and systems and the structures within the ANC are followed, such that by the time they say that, Supra uyahamba, they make that decision by saying, "Akusiyo decision ya Cyril Ramaphosa."
It's the Inter-Ministerial Task Team and the outcomes thereof.
That collectivity. It's the same thing that they did with Jacob Zuma. No one can stand up and say Cyril fired Jacob Zuma. But it was a structured, systematic way. And I think there's a confusion in this country where when Cyril Ramaphosa stays back a bit, bese kuba khona labase uweak akakwadi ukuthatha isinqumo ngendlela lefanele, and that's not necessarily the case.
So you would say that this works to his advantage, that he cannot be said to be the person pushing for somebody else's dismissal or recall.
All he had to prove is that he followed proper procedures, system, consulted, and the highest decision of the ANC, which is the NEC, has taken the decision. He does not necessarily have to be, a cowboy. You are young enough to know those movies. He doesn't have to be a cowboy and crack the whip, stuff
himself.
like that.
But then where's the disconnect here? Because you have the PEC believing that matters within the Northwest remain or are within their purview, that they own this territory and they decide. If Supra attempted to resign but didn't consult them, then it's not happening. But you had a higher structure that actually recommended that he step down. Where's the disconnect when the PEC is now going head-to-head with a higher structure?
It's a serious miscalculation by that PEC because, sometimes when you live on borrowed power, when you are lent a serious big car and suddenly you behave like it's yours, that's not exactly what they did. They confused the fact that the political power that they enjoy right now is a temporary type of power. So when you have got a very fluid power, you don't stand up to those that are actually in real power at this point in time. So that decision of resigning, not resigning, they need to be consulted and all of that. On the face value, it may be correct, but when it comes to power relations between the center and the periphery, they miscalculated.
And then to the Inter-Ministerial Task Team. What if, for argument's sake, they cannot perhaps link him to some of the maladministration to a certain extent? If nothing else, they could say, or at least the corruption. That when we talk about what has happened in the health department, if we talk about Mediosa, what if there is no direct link in that respect? What happens then? Are we going to have the recall? Because it's always a challenge that many can talk of wrong occurring, that a crime has been committed, there's corruption, there's fraud. But what happens in the night sometimes cannot be revealed in the day if we talk about the legal intricacies where, was I there? Did I sign?
Yeah, you see, that's going to be it's going to be a difficult one for him to use that because he is the head of government in the Northwest. So practically everything that happens there, it goes through him. Two things, for example, if I may mention that. One is the program, the strategic program of the province. He leads that, and they reach to conclusion about what needs to be done, what are the targets and all of that. So he is responsible for that. And because he leads the drive of that project, then he's also responsible to monitor and make sure that the implementation is proper. And secondly, when it comes to budgetary issues, he is also responsible. So it is his budget. It may be presented in some instances by the MEC of Finance, but at the end of the day, he sits in structures of government that approve budget, but also take into account how this money has been spent thus far, was it on real issues or not. And three, he is responsible for auditing outcomes in the province. So there's no way that he can say, I did not sign that one, I did not sign that document, I did not know, and all of that, because He is what they call in government a nerve center of governance in that particular part of the world. So he wouldn't be able to anega punyuga in that sense.
And then the politics side of things. Is this perhaps the coming undone of the ANC? That here we had Supra talking about EFF's agenda, or at least now somehow he felt that there were some within the African National Congress that were part of his removal. Although I don't know if the decision is then to do away with those members, or how in fact you can actually establish that there were some ANC members who were collaborating with the economic freedom fighter.
Well, there's one interesting thing that politicians always say when they are faced with challenges. They say that it's politically inspired or motivated. And they forget that they are politicians, so what they are facing is inherently political. And the political issues are about the contestation of power and all of that. So the fact that it might have happened by members from within the African National Congress, it's not necessarily out of order. It is inherently within political parties to contest for power, for position and influence within that political
And it's
power.
Probably to the benefit of ordinary citizens, because if there are wrong things within the ANC happening and somebody exposes them, then better service for us.
It's a good rhetoric to say that politicians are doing things for the public, but it's not always the case. I mean, there's a British MP who once said that the most thing that public servants don't like to do is to do something for the public. So it is highly possible. But at the end of the day, what we should not miss out is that in this country, internal political tensions are actually far much more pronounced than political tensions across political parties.
So it seems. I mean, the Democratic Alliance,
exactly,
and now we have the ANC. But at this point, is the EFF sitting pretty that they can almost see, 2019? That here you've got the DA with its own problems, you've got the ANC with its own internal problems. Could they run away with it at this point?
Well, the one advantage of the EFF is that for now they are a very cohesive, political organization. And one reason that they are a cohesive political organization is that the power around Julius Malema is still very, very solid. If someone was to say to me that the EFF is owned by Julius Malema, I will agree with that. So the power is very clear there. In political parties where there's a higher degree of internal democratic processes, you are likely to see a whole lot more chaotic internal politicking than those that have got your typical hierarchy within the organization. But in any event, the lucky thing for EFF is that they are not governing any province. So the incentives of being in the EFF are not highly tested. If it were to become a national ruling party, it is likely to face the same similar ANC issues.
But then where to for Cyril Ramaphosa's leadership? Because some still say that Supra, by doing this about turn, he's actually daring the president at this point, or his leadership, to get rid of him.
Well, look, Cyril Ramaphosa doesn't necessarily have to pull out a guillotine and chop his head. What he needs to do is to continue to utilize internal structures and processes of the ANC. Because, for those of us who do strategies sometimes, we will tell you that the process of making the strategy is as important as the strategy itself. So this is why you find that Cyril focuses on internal processes, consultations, engagement, and he wants to exhaust all of these things, which is a diplomacy building, it's a statements building. So by the time he says, okay, the NSC has reached this decision and therefore so-and-so is leaving, everyone would have a sense that he tried as much as he could to pursue the diplomatic rule, but he was not met proper on that one. So for me, that's where his emphasis is in, the process matter rather than quickly reaching a decision. The problem with that, though, is that the ANC is limping and the government is equally limping. And therefore, as a leadership, he needs to act with urgency. And yet, he needs to satisfy these various stakeholders that they were part of.
And then the PEC itself, this about turn, it's also been the subject of a lot of debate. Some saying that perhaps there were interests, could be wrong, could be right, that you have people that think if Supra steps down, what is to become of us? We could see the dissolution of that PEC itself. So maybe it had nothing, it probably did, but perhaps it had nothing to do with his right to remain as premier, but perhaps to say, you stay right there, because if you go, something could happen to us. Now, that is the argument by some.
Yeah. Well, the immediate assumption is that there could be patronage considerations, that what is conventionally seen as defending Supra by the PEC members is actually PEC people defending themselves through Supra. This is so Supra is not necessarily the end game of these PEC members, but their own position with the continued presence, of Supra. But I think at the end of the day, what they have done is to seriously miscalculate about the implications of their decision. So they are now a whole lot more walking through a thin ice than they could have decided differently. It was a serious miscalculation on their part.
So if perhaps he was to be recalled, as you maintain that it's probably just a matter of time, that if he were to be recalled and then we have the dissolution of the PEC and then we'll put in a PTT. I was listening today to an interview with Snuki Zikalala, who was saying that, within that PTT, try to get veterans because they no longer have interest. They don't want to be premiers. They don't want to contest positions in the interim. Do you think that is something that should be considered?
Not
necessarily.
Look, not really. I mean, I think today there's an issue about the Premier of Singapore, who's 92 years old. Julius Malema the other day was complaining that in the African Parliament, the youngest guy is 76 or something. We can't, it's not a good idea to go for a retired nurse when you should be building a whole lot of younger nurses to bring ideas. So
Can they be part of the investigation at the very least?
Look, for me, what this country needs, a body of elderly people that enjoy and command the respect, not because they have a position, but because they are valued by society and their own particular organization. So I wouldn't necessarily say that Supra could be replaced by someone who is a veteran or senior like that. In any event, they need to sit back and write books and stuff like that, not necessarily becoming premiers. In fact, this country has a problem of having leaders that for me are on a retirement age. They shouldn't necessarily be very active. Okay,
fair enough. But could they perhaps lead the investigations then? Because some would say that if you've got veterans leading the investigation, then they have no interest. We would like to believe that they are independent, they come in, there's no intention to perhaps disadvantage Supra in this instance or perhaps to favor him, but to get to the truth and ensure that at the end of the day, there's good governance.
But that's also an assumption that an elderly person in the ANC has no interest. The so-called the veterans that are in the ANC, they do have their own particular interests. If you have to go behind the scene and check their commercial interest and engagement, it will tell you proper that they are not necessarily by themselves innocent in this squabbles within the ANC. So I'm not convinced that an age issue for me. It's a way of sorting out.
But it can be a principal issue where I wish they were actually present today to speak for themselves. But it could be a principled issue where they say, irrespective of maybe my shareholding in a specific company, I'm still principled. What is good for the ANC remains good for the ANC. And I'll fight for that and also fight for good governance. That's all. You could have people that say that don't
But
worry about my shareholding.
Is to attribute that to age.
To age, yes, fair enough. Because it doesn't necessarily mean that the older you are, the wiser you become.
It's not just an age analysis what the ANC needs. The ANC needs the ability to manage tensions within itself. Because, by the way, all organizations have got factions. There will never be a stage in the ANC's life, or DA or PSC, where there will not be tensions. Actually, factions inside the organization are not bad. They're only bad if they are poorly managed. So this is a test, it's a litmus test for the national leadership of the ANC. And the good thing, by the way, it is that these things are happening right at the beginning of the 5-year term. So it means the Cyril and his top 6, they need to rise and provide leadership to make sure that, they have a better, smooth sailing moving forward. But it's good that it happens now.
So early.
It will only become a crisis if they fail to sort it out.
Well, we all await the outcome of this specific test. Thank you very much to my political analyst, Umsani Hlophe, joining us on the Northwest Political Developments. More news and updates on the other side of this break. Do stay with us.